Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Tuesday. This is Anthony from Puget Sound Stormwatch. Long time no see on the PSSW YouTube channel. My goal for this year is to start using this channel much more often, especially during critical weather events like one that we're currently in and are expected to have. So the big story today is the wind, and the story coming up for this week is the snow potential. Let's dive right into it, starting with the Windy app. These are surface level winds being forecasted by the high resolution rapid refresh model, the HER 3KM. This is clearly picking up the northwesterly flow coming around the west side of Vancouver Island, going down through the Strait of Juan de Fuca into the Admiralty Inlet area, northwest interior, Whidbey Island. There was a report of a 64 mile per hour wind gust earlier today near the Oak Harbor Naval Air Station. Those are still going as of right now. Expect anywhere between 55 to 65 mile per hour gusts as they peak, and they are peaking between 5 and 6 p.m. so right around now, and then they will gradually subside as the evening goes on. Same applies for all of the Puget Sound area. This model is also picking up an Olympic wind shadow feature between Seattle and Everett, so you may see much less severe wind gusts. It's not going to be anything too crazy for this area, unlike earlier this morning. And that brings up another point. Let's go look at my weather station front page on Weather Underground. This is the Kings Grove neighborhood weather station. This is a map that I posted on my Facebook page earlier today showing the dip in temperatures as the cold front moved through. Looking at the day before, temperatures are relatively mild in the 30s and 40s. As the afternoon time progresses, temperature starts to go up, humidity goes up a little bit, temperature is starting to crash down. So watch this. It's all the way up at right around standard atmospheric pressure, which is 29.92 inches, a little bit below that, and then it just slowly starts to dip all the way down to 29.24 inches of mercury by midnight. So right before midnight, the temperature is 48.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Dew point is 47.5 degrees Fahrenheit. The air is nice and saturated before the cold front passes through. And then as we go to today, so right now the temperature is 41.2 degrees. Dew point is much lower at 37 degrees. Much less saturated in the air right now. So the first observation is at 12:04. These observations occur anywhere between every 4 to 6 minutes. So it starts out at 48.2 degrees, 47.5 degree dew point, and then within 10 to 15 minutes, it's all the way down to 44.2 degrees Fahrenheit, 43.9 degree dew point. The wind direction didn't shift very much with the frontal passage. It's still coming out of the south as the day goes on, and then it starts to switch from the east a little bit, and then goes back to out of the south. Rainfall, we had a big burst of rainfall here as the passage moved through, and then it gradually subsided. But then we have this huge spike up to almost half an inch per hour rainfall rates. This is as of 5:29 a.m. Another small little dip in the temperature. It gets really saturated right around that point. The dew point and the temperature are almost equal. And then as the day goes on, see as the pressure starts to rise again. Still pretty low pressure, but higher than when the front moved through. The 29.31 inches of mercury at midnight. Next on the discussion list is the current hazards and warnings around the Puget Sound area, Western Washington vicinity. It's lit up like a Christmas tree for the most part on this side of the Cascades, even more so in the Columbia River Plateau. These are all freeze warnings and alerts, some winter weather advisories. But on the west side, for the most part, the big story is wind. In the mountains, we have the blizzard warning in effect. This is until 10 a.m. tomorrow, above 2,000 feet for all of the Cascades, all of the Olympics. On the coastline here, we have a coastal flood advisory. We had one for the Puget Sound for a little while today, but that has long since expired. And then we have a high surf warning for the entire coastline all the way down through the Oregon Coastal Range. The National Weather Service in Seattle covers all the way down to Pacific County, so the rest of this down here is all courtesy of Portland's county warning area. For the Puget Sound vicinity, we have a wind advisory in effect until 10 p.m. this evening After that, expect winds to gradually decrease to almost nothing. It'll still be breezy a little bit, especially near the water. And for the Puget Sound marine waters, we have a gale warning in effect until 7 p.m. That's about to expire. To qualify for a gale warning, you have to have wind gusts in excess of 40 knots over marine waters. It's equal to 46 miles per hour. There is 1.15 miles per hour per knot. The bigger story, on the other hand, is what's going on through the Strait of Juan de Fuca. There's a storm warning. This is a forecast of 50 knots or greater winds through here. So 50 knots is equal to 57.5 miles per hour. Off the coast, we have a gale warning. So this is forecasting 40 knots or greater winds for the swath. Small craft advisory as well. For the areas up north susceptible to the westerly surge down the strait, we have a high wind warning in effect until 10 p.m. There's one more tool that I want to check out before we start going into fantasy land with the weather models. That's the Weather IEM bot monitor. This is a really handy tool if you want to check out when a weather forecast office issues warnings, advisories, watches, etc. For example, this is showing that earlier this afternoon we had a coastal flood warning in effect for the North Coast, Central Coast, all the way down towards Grace Harbor County, as well as San Juan County. So that has long since expired. It has been replaced by a coastal flood advisory, which has expired since then for a similar area. So this is the coastal flood advisory that was in effect for the Puget Sound. Most of the Puget Sound and Northwest Interior, Strait of Juan de Fuca. It's not necessarily Kitsap County or the Hood Canal area. But this is the text. Coastal flood warning for the North Coast, Central Coast. And then San Juan County, Admiralty Inlet area, coastal flood advisory. Only for minor coastal flooding. Coastal flood advisory for the strait. And they issue updates as time goes on. This one has immediate broadcast requested. At one point, there was a coastal flood warning for significant coastal flooding in San Juan County. Once again, long since expired, so no concern for that. And then the last update shows that a high surf warning was issued. Coastal flood warning was canceled and replaced with a coastal flood advisory. This is going to be in effect from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. tomorrow. So there is still a slight coastal flood threat for the coast. Coastal flood advisory canceled for the Seattle-Tacoma area. The tide has long since fallen below the flood stage. Winds are beginning to subside and the pressure is beginning to go up as this trough moves out of the area. Then the very last thing we're going to take a look at on this page before I start going into weather models are some of the observations and storm reports. This shows 16 inches of snow reported at Stevens Pass, 13 inches reported at Mount Baker, and then the wind gusts from this morning with the frontal passage. SeaTac, we got 52 miles per hour, Fir Crest 53, Greenwater 57. Out west at Hoquiam, 60 miles per hour, so that qualifies for a high wind warning down there. So at this point of the video, I believe we are about halfway covered on this discussion. We've gotten through all of the prerequisites before the models. Now it's time to jump into Weather Bell Premium, and let's start viewing some high-resolution short-range maps, starting out with the HER 3KM. This is composite reflectivity for western Washington and surrounding areas. This forecast is the 0Z, so right now it goes out to 18 hours from the time of origination. Subtract 8 hours from this time, this is 0 hours universal coordinated time. So for Pacific, we are -8 for Pacific Standard Time. This is as of the 4 p.m. run. So soon we'll be coming out with the 1Z 5 p.m. run since it's now 5:21 p.m. But for now, let's look at what this model has to offer for the forecast. So 5 p.m. it forecasts some heavy rain down south by Olympia. That is verifying so far. And then things begin to dry out around the Puget Sound. However, you can see this westerly surge in full effect down the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And it looks like potentially the surface feature moves onshore in Oregon tonight. Things are still dry around the immediate Puget Sound region. However, up north, near Everett all the way up to Skagit County, we do have some light to moderate showers. And then those will begin to move southeast as rain fills in a little bit through the Chehalis Gap. The heaviest of rain will stay a little bit to the south. However, we do have this precipitation band that forms over Everett and then gradually moves south as the flow switches to out of the northwest. Looks like this rain feature will stall for a little bit, and then we hit the end of that model run. These are forecasted precipitation totals from the same model in inches. Mostly dry around the central and south sound. Southwest interior is going to get a little bit of rain. A little bit of rain north of the Washington, B.C. border, and a little bit around Everett northward. This, however, will fill in as the night goes on and as we go into tomorrow morning. Once we hit the end of the 18-hour run, we're between 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch around the SeaTac area. Not too much rain or precipitation at that. I should say precipitation. This doesn't account for just rain. It accounts for all precipitation types: rain, snow, freezing rain, sleet, etc. Surface temperatures over the next 18 hours are going to stay pretty mild. They'll dip into the mid-30s, maybe even some low 30s in the south as morning time comes upon us, but then they're going to start warming up again back into the 40-degree range. So 19Z, this is 11 a.m. tomorrow morning, anywhere between 38 to 40 degrees in the South Sound. Same can be said for the Central and North Sound. Way cooler in the mountains as expected. Mount Rainier 17 degrees. For this model run, I'm going to zoom in a little bit to really emphasize Western Washington. This is, once again, the HER 3 km. These are wind gusts at 33 feet above sea level. It's showing this huge wind field just off of Whidbey Island. That is verifying as of now. However, we have reached a peak for the most part for the winds around the area. So this will gradually continue to subside as nighttime goes on. And then as we progress through the frames, winds will basically go extinct as we hit the end of this run. This too is a pretty cool map. This shows the accumulated max wind gusts at 33 feet above sea level. As we go to the very end of this run, and as a matter of fact, I forgot to mention that every 6-hour intervals on 0Z, 6Z, 12Z, and 18Z, this model run forecasts out to 48 hours. However, since it's still early on in the hour, this one's only out to hour 23 as of now. So it's 5:27 p.m. at the time of this video. We're out to hour 23, and this still has another 25 hours to process. So we are now well beyond 18 hours. And it's really picking up this wind shadow out of the west, showing some pretty good wind swaths between like the northern part of Port Angeles all the way out towards Oak Harbor, San Juan Islands. These are some isolated 58 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts, as you see on the legend down here. Now it's time to jump into my favorite forecast model. This is the North American Mesoscale model, the NAM High Resolution 3KM model. This is showing the same map as before, accumulated max 33-foot wind gusts in miles per hour. This has a much higher swath of winds over the Strait of Juan de Fuca compared to the HER 3KM. And this goes out to 60 hours. This is ran every 6 hours. So if we go to the end of this run and then compare it to one run ago, it's actually decreasing as time goes on. So this shows 71 miles per hour for the southern point of Vancouver Island here. That's near Victoria. That would have been crazy if it verified, but luckily it didn't. And then one other thing that I'd like to bring to your attention, if you look up north here, start to see the swath comes out of the northeast towards Birch Bay, Bellingham, Ferndale, Custer. This is the Fraser River outflow that we're going to be watching, because that brings us into our next topic, the potential snow and dry cold snap that we have coming to this area. So now here's the next map. This is the composite reflectivity and type. So green and lighter colors are rain, blue is snow. If you see any freezing rain, it's going to be this magenta color, and then sleet is sort of a peach color. Watch this closely as we progress through the frames. It's all rain through the Puget Sound, all snow up in the mountains. And then something interesting happens. We start to get some snow that starts to pop up. This is as of 4 a.m. tomorrow, hour 18 from the run. This is still sort of a long shot, but it does show some snow here in the South Sound. And then as we progress through the model a little bit more, it's still mostly rain through the central Puget Sound, some snow up north, especially north and east. So foothills, you guys could see maybe some small accumulations tomorrow, even potentially. But as we go into 2 days from now, this is 7 a.m. Thursday. Look at that. That is showing some pretty good snowfall for the South Sound, Tacoma vicinity. If that verifies, that's going to be pretty cool. And then another thing to bring to attention here, this is looking 2 days out from the origin of this run. So this is 10 a.m. Thursday. There's some deformation bands by the looks of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, this could be a convergence zone, but I believe they're just deformation precipitation bands. But these will move south through the area. It'll be over SeaTac by around 4 p.m. Thursday, and then it sinks down to Tacoma within a couple hours. After that, the moisture will begin to fizzle and will really be in the brink of this cold snap. With all of that put aside now, I'd say it's time to have a little bit of fun with the weather models. We're in the winter category now, still on the NAM 3KM. This is total snow for the area, assuming 10-to-1 ratio, so 1 part precipitation to 10 parts snow. So in theory, 0.1 inches of precipitation would equal 1 inch of snow. With this proportion, this is in inches. It's all Cascades and Olympics to start things out, but watch as it starts to creep west a little bit. This little swath here is just under an inch. This is at hour 18, 4 a.m. tomorrow. Once again, I still kind of think this is a long shot. I think it's a little bit too early for snow accumulation. This doesn't account for ground accumulation. This is only snowfall. There's another model, the Kuchera ratio down here, that takes into account some of these other factors. So it does reduce some amounts for the Puget Sound lowlands, but it, as you saw, it increased some of the amounts for the Cascades, taking elevation into consideration. Progressing through the rest of the run, we go all the way out to hour number 60, and, well, the story tells itself, guys. The Cascades are just going to get a stupid amount of snow. And the Olympics, Mount Olympus is, I mean, this is unprecedented. 106.1 inches is the most on this graph right here. And that could be anywhere from, say, Mount Rainier up to Glacier Peak, Mount Baker, perhaps. It doesn't show exactly where the 106.1 is, but still, 70.6 inches near Mount Rainier in the national park. Crazy. And that's just 60 hours. Down here in the South Sound, this is, I'd say, between 1 and 2 inches for this little area. Amounts grow up as you go east away from the water, so higher elevations away from water will benefit from this event if it verifies. And one more thing before we move on, this is 1 hour snowfall rates. Again, 10-to-1 ratio. 18 hours out, this is once again 4 a.m. tomorrow. This little purple area right here is around a half an inch per hour of snow accumulation. That's right around my area. If it verifies, then, you know, whoopee, I guess. Just east of Everett, it has this little 1.5 to 2 inch per hour swath right there. And then it just kind of dries out for the most part, unless you're in the North Sound by Bellingham. So gradually higher snowfall rates. And then we watch this little deformation band setup form and some occasionally higher embedded snowfall rates, but nothing too crazy. Nothing around like 1 inch per hour plus like forecasted for the South Cascades. And then once we hit the end of this run, really nothing for the central Puget Sound. This is 10 p.m. Thursday night. That should just about do it for the short range models. Now I want to move on to the mid-range models. This is the European, the ECMWF high resolution model. This goes out to 90 hours from the time of origin. So this is the 18Z. This is 10 a.m. today. We are looking at total snow, once again assuming 10-to-1 precipitation ratio. And it's a little bit lower resolution since it's mid-range, so it doesn't quite exaggerate the terrain features as well. There will be what I like to call a little bit of terrain bleeding, so it doesn't take into account the cutoff of where the Cascade Crest is, as well as the Her or Nam. But then watch as this starts to fill in as we progress through the days. So this is hour 60. This is the end of the Nam run. This is 10 p.m. Thursday night. We're at 1 inch predicted for the SeaTac Airport. Around 1.5 inches for Bellingham. And then we're going to continue to just put a little bit of snow, assuming this sticks, which I don't think it will, but if it does, then whoop-de-doo. But by the end of the run, it has a max 1.2 inches for the SeaTac Airport. Pretty much the same for Bellingham, and I mean, it's just crazy for the Cascades. Luckily, a little bit less around Snoqualmie Pass than Stevens and White Pass, but you know, still, with the blizzard warning in effect and the winds and reduced visibilities, just don't travel. Don't travel over the passes if you don't have to. So now that I got all of that out of the way, I'd like to voice some of my concerns with this forecast, starting with the relative humidity for the area. This is 925 millibar relative humidity in percent. 925 millibars is about 2,500 feet above sea level. This is showing a very saturated air at the moment, but watch as we progress through the days and you start to see these lighter colors come in through the Fraser River Valley. This is hour 42. This is 4 a.m. Thursday. This is when some of the snow was forecasted around the Puget Sound. We're going to have a battle of the air masses. Watch as this really starts to dry out. And I mean, it just gets pretty dry around the northwest interior. A little bit less dry around the Puget Sound. But, I mean, geez, it's going to be pretty hard to get some moisture up here. Definitely going to be a cold snap without a doubt. That's almost for certain. But the moisture is going to be the wild card here. These are the temperatures. Same height, 2,500 feet above sea level approximate. At the beginning, these are all in degrees Celsius, so right around 34 degrees Fahrenheit around the Puget Sound. Temperatures will decrease as the night goes on into morning. It'll be a little bit below freezing at 2,500 feet. And then once this air mass starts to sink down south, watch as the temperature comes crashing down, especially if you're in northern Okanagan, Whatcom counties. And then it starts to sort of oscillate back in the direction of higher temps. So it sinks down a little bit, and then it starts to move a little bit back north. Things warm up around the South Sound and the coast. So the coast is not expected to get any snow at this time. Just watch how warm it is for the most part. You start to get those lighter colors that come back in towards Friday and Saturday. For a little bit of fun, let's look at the GFS. This is the American forecast model showing 925 millibar temperatures in Celsius again. This one goes out 384 hours. Really, anything past like 96 is considered fantasy land. These are in 3-hour intervals, so this is 30 hours after the time of origin. Once again, it does agree with the Euro on really the timing of this cold air mass coming down, but not necessarily the magnitude of it. And it still has some of the southern portions of western Washington warmer than the Euro does. Hold on tight, folks, because we are almost done with the extent of this video. Last thing I want to check out are the Ensemble mean members. So these take 50 different runs with tweaked parameters and averages them out. This is the European Ensemble. This shows the potential locations of lows. So you see those L's right there? Those are weak troughs that are forecasted. The color scale is showing average sea level pressure. So these isobars, for example, 1008 millibars, 1012, so it's in increments of 4 millibars. So this is trying to predict where a trough is going to form or move. For example, when we're looking 42 hours out, it does predict the trough settling over the northern Columbia River Plateau. And then as we continue to go along, it's also forecasting a weak trough to move onto the central Oregon coast 78 hours out. And then after that, the disparity just, becomes unprecedented. There's really no correlation whatsoever. This, however, this one is interesting because 90 hours out, the precision is there, the accuracy not really, but we're going to have to keep a close eye on some of these numbers because some of these surface level atmospheric pressures are kind of low, like in the 990 to 1000 range. Gonna have to keep a close eye on that. Also, look at that, 986 millibars. If that follows a favorable track, that would bring some pretty good winds to the area. While we're at this point, let's look at some of the probability maps. Right now I have the probability of surface level minimum temperatures below freezing. This is from 0 to 100. The really dark red here is 100%. And so our first real good probability of having below freezing temperatures is at hour 36. This is as of 10 p.m. tomorrow night, and these go in 6-hour intervals. Probability really goes up like between 60 and 66 hours. So this is 12Z, that's 4 a.m. Friday. So Thursday night into Friday is when we're really going to have that Arctic air mass slide into the Puget Sound. And it's just red pretty much the rest of the time. Like, it's going to be a deep cold snap if this model verifies. Here's the probability of total snowfall greater than 1 inch. Same rule applies. 6-hour intervals, 0 to 100. Hour number 90. 120. So we're sort of in fantasy land here. I'd trust the first half of this model run more than the second half. It's got some pretty good snowfall chances for most of the Puget Sound, of course, unless you're like right over the water. But the Cascade Crest going into some of the western foothills here, you've got really anywhere between a 30 and 50% chance of having greater than 1 inch fall over this time. We go to greater than 3 inches. It's quite a bit less, but the chance is still there. So this blue equates to approximately 20 to 30% for the South Sound, less for the North Sound. This is greater than 3 inches at 144 hours, sort of fantasy land. And then once you go greater than 6 inches, it just, it really starts dropping off a cliff. So this is greater than 6 inches at 144 hours out. This is 10 a.m. Monday. Between 10 and 20% chance of having greater than 6 inches of snowfall fall for the South Sound. That's a pretty good chance, but I'm only going to take it with a grain of salt at this point. There's still lots of time left for this to develop. This surface level anomaly map will tell the story for itself. Watch what happens when this Arctic air mass really moves down in here. Like, it just gets brutally cold, especially over the Cascades and the foothills Olympics. I mean, the anomaly is like 36 degrees Fahrenheit below average for some of these areas. Still 20 to, say, 24 degrees below average for most of the Puget Sound. For a good 90% of this model run, the whole Puget Sound stays below average for temperatures. The last map that I want to look at for tonight is the 500 millibar height and anomaly. So these are 500 millibar heights, the equivalent to about 18,000 feet above sea level. These are measured in decameters, so 10 meters. There is 3.28 feet per meter, so each decameter is equal to 32.8 feet. And the darker green colors are lower heights. Lighter red colors are higher heights. Lower heights equals troughs. higher heights equals ridges. The very beginning of this model run shows the trough that we're dealing with today as bringing the wind. So it's predicting that to move off to the east and weaken, and then it's also picking up possibly a trough forming over the Columbia River Gorge and then moving off to the southeast. This could be our weather maker right here, folks. If it were just a little bit more west, like previous model runs were suggesting, we'd have higher confidence with this event, but it seems to be drifting a little bit too far to the east. And after that, towards Fantasyland, things start to warm up and potentially a ridge will form. So, see that little orange there? That's indicating a signal of a ridge forming. Okay, everyone, I think that will do it for today's video. If you made it this far without skipping around, props to you. Thanks for dealing with my short attention span. One last little tidbit that I want to look at before we end this video is the satellite imagery. This is infrared imagery from 12 hours ago, showing this Sting jet low as it moves through. So take a look at this. This is as it's moving onshore and down Vancouver Island. Starts to weaken, and this is when some of the winds start to kick in to the strait here. Visible satellites even better. Like this is just beautiful. So let's let this run one more time. So see the low after its bombogenesis really starts to weaken. It moves towards the southeast. And then we got to keep an eye on these guys out here. Got a big trough right there, another big trough right there. So I think with all of that being said, hopefully I got to point out to you guys in a clear manner. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. This is Anthony from Puget Sound Stormwatch. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, go follow Puget Sound Stormwatch on Facebook, and I will see you guys for the next video. Thank you guys again so much for watching.